Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. As we begin our study of the Book of Esther, I would like us to consider a question to begin with. How did Esther even get the opportunity to become queen in the Achaemenid Empire to begin with? She was a Jew, not coming from a noble family. What events brought about her coming to the throne? The reason I want us to consider this question is because the name of God is not mentioned at all in this book. Nor is this book quoted in other inspired scripture, which causes some to proclaim that the Book of Esther doesn't belong in scripture. Of course, I believe such a conclusion to be wrong, and the reason revolves around the answer to this question, one that we will answer at the end of the series. For now, let's keep this question in the back of our mind as we study the book. So, if you have a Bible with you, you can turn to the Book of Esther, to Esther chapter 1. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 9. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Esther chapter 1, beginning at verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this was the Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the citadel, that in the 3rd year of his reign he made a feast for all his officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, the nobles, and the princes of the provinces being before him, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. And when these days were completed, the king made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Shushan the citadel, from great to small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white and blue linen curtains fastened with cords of fine linen and purple on silver rods and marble pillars, and the couches were of silver and gold on a mosaic pavement of alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. And they served drinks in golden vessels, each vessel being different from the other, with royal wine in abundance, according to the generosity of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had ordered all the officers of his household that they should do according to each man's pleasure. Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. In the introduction, we stated that the Book of Esther took place during the reign of Xerxes I. And yet the book begins by telling us it took place during the days of Ahasuerus, who was king of Persia. And while this is true, as we have seen in other places in Scripture, sometimes the name we see in the Hebrew is not the name of the person in their own language or in history as a whole. That doesn't make the Bible wrong. It means that the Bible refers to a person by a different name. Why did we conclude that Ahasuerus was Xerxes I? Well, first of all, we have to have a king in the Achaemenid Empire who reigned at least 12 years, so this eliminates quite a few of those kings. Then, of course, we can exclude any of the kings that are named in the Bible with their actual names, which would exclude Cyrus, Darius I, and Artaxerxes I. That leaves us with 4 kings before the fall of the Achaemenid Empire to the Greeks: Xerxes I, Darius II, Artaxerxes II, and Artaxerxes III. The final thing we need to look at is the strength of the empire. Esther 1 verse 1 says that Ahasuerus reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. That would place the king of Esther to be at the height of Persian dominance, or at least near the height of Persian dominance. The thing is, after the reigns of Artaxerxes I, the king of Ezra and Nehemiah, the Persian Empire began to decline. It began losing battles to the Greeks until finally in 330 BC, Alexander the Great conquered them, bringing their empire to an end. That means that any king that reigned after 424 BC would really not fit the description for the king of Esther. Eliminating these kings leaves us with only one, Xerxes I. Is this an ironclad determination? No. But it is the likely one, as even the events described here fit with the archaeological record and help explain the actions of his son Artaxerxes I in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. So with who Ahasuerus is, for our purposes being settled, what is the scene being depicted here in Esther 1? It is one of a party. The party takes place in the palace of the king in Shushan, which we discussed in Nehemiah was the Persian city of Susa. In Persia, there were 4 royal cities, Ecbatana, Susa, Persepolis, and Parsegade. Babylon served as a capital after the Persian conquest, but the city rebelled and was destroyed by Xerxes I in 482 BC. The year of his reign is told to us as being the 3rd year, meaning that depending on what time of the year it is, we're either in 483 or 482 BC. At this feast were all the nobles of Persia, all Ahasuerus' officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, along with the princes of the provinces. In other words, this is a who's who of the Persian Empire. What was the purpose of the party? For Ahasuerus to show off the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty. This feast therefore reminds me of another feast that we'll read of later in the book of Daniel, that of Belshazzar, with the key difference being that the Persian Empire wouldn't end that night. Needless to say, though, this party was an ego trip for Ahasuerus, the size of which fits perfectly with the strength of Persia under Xerxes I. This party, though, wasn't a couple of days. No, it was 6 months. Think about that for a moment. Ahasuerus was wealthy enough to host festivities for 6 whole months. Now, yes, today royalty do have long celebrations, usually for major occasions like jubilees or war victories. But in order to have these celebrations, one has to be wealthy enough to do so, something that Ahasuerus definitely was. As to the timing of the feast, we find that at the end of 6 months, Ahasuerus held a 1-week feast for the people dwelling in Shushan. This likely coincided with the beginning of the new year, which for the Persians would have been in what we call early to mid-March, depending on the lunar calendar. If this is true, then the 6-month feast took place starting in about what we call mid-September. History-wise, Xerxes had just defeated the Egyptians who had revolted against Persian rule, and he was making plans to invade Greece, so to have a party during this time period would make sense. And as is often the case at these parties, there was a lot of wine present for the people to get drunk on. Now, of course, Ahasuerus didn't make the people drink. They could have chosen not to if they wished, which is unusual since kings and hosts often are insulted if you don't eat and drink what they serve. The fact that you didn't have to drink, though, is noteworthy. But let's not kid ourselves. It seems that most people did drink and did get drunk, which is important for what happens later on in chapter 1. Verse 9 concludes by saying that Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. And that is quite usual, for at that time men and women of nobility didn't often party together. As to who Vashti is in history, we'll save that for the next lesson. For now, though, just remember, there are major festivities going on in Susa with lots of drinking and partying being done. What happens next? We'll find that out, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Esther chapter 1, verses 10 to 22, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.